Representative Sherwood. Here. Representative Stith. Representative Walters.
Here.
Representative Swanitzer.
Here.
Chairman Nicholas.
Okay, first up is election security, Senate File 153. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see a budgetary footnote on this. Tell us what it is, please. Go ahead.
What's that, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Okay, so would you like me to focus just on the appropriation then, or?
Yep.
Okay, so part of the bill that the reason why it's here is a $100,000 appropriation one time for the county clerks to maybe attend some professional development or acquire a consultant as it deals with election security issues. The whole idea being that they're serious professionals. The whole point of the bill is that we're consolidating their current practices when it comes to election security, but also recognizing that's an evolving area where they're going to have to, stay at the tip of the spear, as it were, and continue that professional development. So $100,000 for professional development consultants. That's what the appropriation is.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So could you give us some more information about how you came up with that number? Because I see that there is a formula of how that gets distributed within the counties, but it's not clear to me why that 100,000 was picked. Thank you.
Right. This whole bill has been closely vetted with the county clerks. Now is that with that's what the Clerks Association came up with. I believe it's $3,000 for every county. Then the rest is distributed based off of population. And so that is what the Clerks Association was okay with. So that's what's in the bill.
Okay. Any other questions? Any public comment? Seeing none, close public comment. Motion. Move to pass by Representative Walters, second by Representative Henderson. Roll call.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative Larson. Representative Sherwood. Representative Stith.
Excused. He may have left the vote, but I don't know. Probably not on the.
He didn't on the
That's fine.
re-referral. Okay. Representative Walters.
Aye.
Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. There you go. Oh. Okay, next up, Senate File 146. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Camerati, LSO Budget Fiscal, here to talk about SF0146, and I am willing to proceed however you would like to.
Sure, I think it's been a while since we've looked at this, so just kind of walk us through the bill a little bit.
Absolutely.
And particularly the changes.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So I think the best place would be to start on page 11. Starting with the SBC State Facility Inflation Reserve on lines 4 and 5 for $51,405,563.
Okay, Catherine, can you get a little closer?
Yes. And the JAC increased that by 1.4 million because there was a document provided during testimony that was roughly the increase for the actual amount needed based on the calculation performed.
So that was the document provided by State Construction.
The State Construction Department, Mr. Chairman. Moving forward on line 6 and 7, we have the SBC Cost Escalation De-Escalation Fund for $7 million. On line 8, we have the State Fair projects for $500,000, and including footnote 2. That basically just says that this appropriation will only be expended on projects identified in their State Fair master plan. On line 9, we have the Fort Washakie demolition, $452,000. We have the SCD Riverton State Office Building, lines 10 and 11 for $12.5 million. We have the State Hospital demolition of 15.
So just to clarify, what you've just talked about, are these additions to it?
These are not additions.
that's
I'm
right.
just going over, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I'm just going over the appropriations.
Okay, go ahead.
On line 12, the state hospital demolition of 15 million.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd back up to the Riverton office building. That was a change from the JAC bill. The JAC bill is
Apologies.
at 34 million and this is at 12.5.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, apologies, that would be correct. The Senate did reduce that to 12.5 million
On the Riverton Hospital.
on the Riverton State Office Building. Line 13, the Emerson Building rehabilitation for 500,000. Line 14, LCCC's exterior facade for 5.7 million and 4.6 million. Line 15, the power line tech for 2.2 million and 1.7 million in private revenues. Line 16, the EWC construction technology building for 3.3 million. Line 17, the NWC Orndorff building, 4 million. Line 18, the military campus recreation for 25,000. And if you recall, the JAC did have a multi-split on those funds to be appropriated, and those were effectively removed. That clause, we're no longer doing that multi-campus split.
Yeah.
On line 19, we have the Osley Ranch, and line 20, we have the Women's Center roof repair. In the section, actually, I would suggest we speak about the University of Wyoming changes next instead of going into the section 300s. So on page 13, there were a couple of things done. There was an amendment to bring in session law from 2019, and that actually is on page 5, but it's related to the University of Wyoming.
On which page?
On page 5,
Going back to the front?
going back,
The inserted section 4, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, they inserted 2019 Wyoming session laws, chapter 206, sections 4 and 7A and B, to revert 49 million LISRA, 49 million funds back to the LISRA from the Wyoming student housing account. These funds were from high interest loans and bonds that the university were not using or couldn't use, and so they would just be reverted back to the LISRA. In the same amendment, they all, going back to page 13, they also the Senate reinserted the language that no state funds will be expended for the AMK Ranch renovation, as well as inserted section 11, which is on page 23, that basically required reporting requirements for the University of Wyoming. Page 23, line 14, the construction budget and timelines for the projects identified in this section and the University of Wyoming. Line 18, the status and progress of the projects identified in this section, that being the student housing project. And any change orders completed for the projects identified in this section and the University of Wyoming student housing project, and the status of fundraising efforts to raise matching funds and the source of any matching funds reserved for purposes of the appropriations to the University of Wyoming in the 2022 session laws, Chapter 49, Section 4, Section 67. And they did restrict those funds just to the student housing project. So no funds would be available unless the student housing project was completed or is completed. They could go ahead and sign contracts for other projects as well.
Okay.
Back to the section 300s, Senate File 0146 eliminated section 7B, the 3 million for a historic building.
Page on.
It was removed from the bill, but it would have been on page 14, It essentially removed all of section B, page 14, page 15, it removed section B that had an appropriation of 3 million for a historic building in a historic community. The Senate also removed 3.5 million for a winter recreation center. That was section 7A. The other restraint that the Senate placed was that the Osley Rodeo funds, the matching funds are restricted to non-state funds. And that would be on page 16, the Osley Rodeo Bridge.
So the effect of that was do what?
To restrict the non-state funds for the matching funds, they can't. No more state funds will be appropriated one for one for the rodeo bridge. They need to find another source of funding for the matching funds, either in donations.
For the 500,000.
For the 4 million, Mr. Chairman, for the,
Oh, okay.
Is it, Mr. Chairman? Is your opinion, how do we define non-state?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I believe that non-state funds would be, the source would need to be from private, such as donations or other sources.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
it used to say from any other source, and then the Senate modified this to say non-state funds. So state funds that the city of Cheyenne would receive, for example, would come through the direct distribution formula. So they couldn't use funds that originated from the state. It is not limited to private funds. If that were the case, it would have said private funds. Non-state funds would also include things such as their own local revenue from their 8 mil property tax, sales and use tax, optional sales tax, et cetera.
That's considered state funds?
That is not considered state funds. It is considered local revenue.
Mr. Chairman. Well, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dawn, how about if YDOT, the commission, had funds that were from a non-state source, even though if it's a state agency, then is it considered state funds?
Mr. Chairman, historically, we've looked at, say, federal funds, if they got federal highway funds or something, as a non-state source. At least that's the interpretation we have applied in community colleges, the University of Wyoming, that sort of thing.
Follow up to that, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Would the highway dollar FMRs to the YDOT be considered state funds then? Yeah, and I guess I ask this because all money's kind of fungible, and so then you say, well, where did it really come from?
Mr. Chairman, I think the FMRs would, because they hit the state treasurer's office and then are subsequently distributed to the state agency. So if you wanted to refine that further and be more explicit for only private funds, or
I think well, this will be, just make a note of it, Don. I think we want to go back to the way it was. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Kathy.
Mr. Chairman, that was relatively the summation of the changes. So 6.5 reduction in the two projects from the historic community building and the winter recreation center, as well as a decrease of 22 million for the Riverton State Office Building and the restrictions on the University of Wyoming for the AMK Ranch, as well as bringing back in the 2019 session laws to revert their 49 million back to the LISRA on March 24th.
Okay, any questions for Catherine? All right. Committee, what's your pleasure? Well, I do have a, yeah, move the bill by Representative Walters, seconded by Representative Sherwood.
I'm not the only one doing that today.
So I do have a question while we're working on this. And my question is for Jerry. On the
You mean Director Benson?
yeah, that guy. And I want to make sure that on the 51 million and particularly the components that goes to the community colleges, and what I want to make sure is, so that's page 11 and 12. So you may recall and Don, you might have helped me plug in the dates, but 2 years ago, we appropriated, I think, $12 million for community college construction for the most shovel-ready project. And I think 11 and a half of that, or most of that, went to LCCC. And so they've gone out, have gone through the process. I think it's a CMR and under contract and underway. With the 10% allowance under increased costs, I think that project now is only authorized up to about 24 million. We now know that the costs are going to come in between 30 and 31. And then last year, we had, when we authorized those positions, we gave a much larger inflationary clause to them, but we didn't include that project. So we skipped a year to catch up with inflation. So it's a year back, both in terms of, the costs of materials and labor and that type of stuff. So I want to make sure that that in this process that we have sufficient funds, frankly, to cover the rest of that project, because the goal is to finish the projects that have already started. And so I want to understand what's your interpretation of how to go about evaluating community college projects with these dollars and how you'll allocate them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jerry Vincent, Director of the State Construction Department, and I have Mrs. Ann Norton, who is the Administrator of the Construction Management Division and Secretary to SBC. So regarding the community colleges and specific to the LCCC, and you're probably referring to the RAC project that's under construction. Mm-hmm. One of the issues that I see with it is that it started in a 2021 appropriation versus the rest of them are 2022. They received a different inflationary type bump than this one did. It did get a bump, but it didn't get that bump. So it's a little behind that. So if everything came through the session as expected, the dollars are unchanged, or inflation gets approved. We gave 2 different percents through JAC and to everyone looking at a 20%, 30%. So my belief is that this project would fall into that higher end of that inflation rate we're talking about. And that number would cover
cover the rest of this project, so.
All
Yeah,
right.
it started back in 2019. This is probably one of our last ones that, I know we're in 2023, but we're still doing some cleanup on no CapCon being approved in 2020, and this one started, got hung up in that, did not catch back up to the other ones in terms of its inflationary bumps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the answer is we don't need to tinker with it. It's taken care of. Yeah, all right, thank you. Okay, do we have any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would move to reinsert original section 7A and B.
Moving second and discussion.
What is it?
That's the project and the $30 million historic building.
3 million in historic?
Yes, and also includes the winter recreation area.
That's both of them.
That's both of them.
So they both go back in. Discussions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Any other motions? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will pass out my amendment here. And so, Mr. Chairman, as you look at this, this is in regards to the University of Wyoming, and there's currently 70 million in the bill for the University of Wyoming capital construction projects. And as we heard through testimony throughout December and January, for the inflationary needs for the dorm project, student housing project rather, the War Memorial West Stands and the natatorium, their real inflationary need is probably closer to $120 million. So what this amendment does is it allows for a transfer of $120 million so that they could sign the contracts, but then it actually cash flows it over the next 3 years. So each year they could get a minimum of basically of $40 million up to but not to exceed 75 million in any 1 year for the next 3 years. And that allows them to sign the contracts they need going forward, but it doesn't, that way they know the money's in place, the contractors know the money's in place, but it allows on the state side for us to cash flow it over 3 years, which is really what's makes the most sense. It keeps the interest of those dollars coming to the LSRA versus to the university, so that benefits the state in that regard. And then towards the end of the amendment, it does two things. It eliminates in section 11, they had a big, long reporting requirement. First, it eliminates the section on the top of page 24 that would have required them to come back for further legislative approval on the War Memorial West Stadium as well as the Corbett Pool. This takes out that language so they would not have to come back for any further approval on those. And then in all of the reporting, it really just condenses the reporting. And this you'll find on page 2 of your amendment, lines 32 through 37. And it just says that they will report on the budget, construction status, timelines, fundraising, and matching efforts of all University of Wyoming construction projects supported by this appropriation. And then so that's just a simpler, more concise way instead of the candling of all their ideas. You know, one of them that really bothered me in there, they had asked for change orders. Well, I really don't know that I care if they move an outlet from one side of the room to another, and that would be considered a change order. So this is just a simpler version of that. And then if you go to the bottom of page 2, starting on line 45 of the amendment, and then on to the top of the next, this just says the University of Wyoming shall not engage in any new capital construction projects until the projects provided in this section are completed, except for major maintenance projects, emergency projects, projects at the agriculture experiment stations, projects funded entirely by private funds, or projects related to research and instructional needs. So I think that's sort of a catch-all to the university, that we're indicating to the university. If you've got enough construction going on campus, maybe pause for a little bit and let's wrap these up. But we also don't want to hamstring them in some way in terms of emergency projects, private projects, and those sort of things. So that's without going into the line by line, that's what this amendment does. And I guess I should go back up. It does on the table on page 13, it reduces that 70 million down by 25 million to 40 million for this year. And so that's, again, that's that 40 million over 3 years.
Okay, does everyone understand the amendment? So we've got some folks from UW here. Are we missing anything? That's the question. We just want to make sure that, you know, within the number of what we're providing, if there's some issue that perhaps we may have forgotten.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, I tried to track it as you were explaining it, that I think on pages 13 to 23 or 24, we've captured all that. The reporting on 24, we do that anyway on a quarterly basis, so condensing it down makes sense. That information is already available. My concern, and I may have missed it, Representative Walters, but the language on beginning on page 8, where, or excuse me, is it page, starts on page 5 where the old 2019 session laws was brought in, and then that 49 million reverts March of 23. Did that get cleaned up in one of these amendments? I just,
Mr. Chairman, that language would stay in the bill, so that money would just revert, and we would start over with new money, you might say, for the
okay.
cash flow of this project. And Mr. Chairman, while I have the microphone, I would also note that on page 13, line 28 of the bill, we strike that footnote number 2 regarding AMK Ranch. And the reason I suggest doing that is it's just overly restrictive. You know, at that point, you couldn't replace a router if you needed to for research purposes. And so we strike that, but we also pick it up in that final note on the amendment saying no new major capital construction projects are going to go forward. And so I think it's a good compromise in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, the deletion of line 28 on page 13 is important. We have some ongoing construction projects we have to finish up when the snow melts this spring, and we always have ongoing stuff when for that facility up there. So to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I think the amendment addresses it, provides for the funding of 120 million, addresses the cash flow issue, but also guarantees that the funds are available once the projects are under contract.
Any updates on that progress?
Mr. Chairman, the university has a regulation that governs the trustees regarding construction projects. We don't enter into a contract unless the funds are fully available. And so we're under contract with a guaranteed price on the North Dorm facility. We have a hard number for the South Dorm, but it's not under contract.
How good is that hard number for?
It's, the hard number is not, it's a verbal hard number that the contractor has said that they would honor, but until the contract is signed, you know, I don't want to say that it's completely hard, but we've been assured it's hard.
So assuming this bill passes, you have an anticipated date when you would approve the contract?
Mr. Chairman, the next Board of Trustees meeting is March 22nd. It could be on the agenda at that board meeting. And excuse me, I can't remember, capital construction funds are available July 1.
Typically, and
But
they'll be available immediately.
immediately upon all acts?
Yep.
Okay, so then we could, and it's my understanding in my last conversation with Bill Mai last week that he was anticipating somewhere between 95% and 100% construction documents on the stadium project by the 1st of March. So potentially we could have that contract also. It may have to get pushed a little bit because you have to put it out to bid, that sort of thing. But that one, you know, by our April meeting or the May meeting, which is May 9th or 10th. So that would be the time frame.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Any other questions for the president? Come on, I'm gonna answer your question.
Lloyd, here's your chance. There you go.
Yeah, I noticed the trees are gone at the law school. Can you just give me an update on that project?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, the groundbreaking of the law school happened around mid-September of '22. The trees were removed. The construction is ongoing. It's been under contract since late last summer. Last time I talked to Bill Mai, the project was on schedule, on budget. As you know, also the parking garage, it slowed down a little because of the bad weather, and we'd anticipated that would be completed by the 1st of March. Last time I was over there a week ago, I did a drive-by. It's not going to make that time frame, but it's getting close.
Okay,
So those are the two big projects now that are ongoing.
okay, any further questions? Thank you, appreciate your testimony. Okay, back to the amendment. Everyone understand the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carried. Any other amendments? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to delete the non-state funds in relation to the bridge.
And
think-
reinsert the prior language.
Pardon?
And reinstate the prior language?
Yes, please.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. Anything else? Roll call.
Representative Henderson. Aye. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Aye. Representative Stith.
Aye.
Representative Walters.
Aye.
Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. And so, Don, I think the request is to get this out into the floor this afternoon so that we can expedite it. We'll call it up and walk through it so that we can get it back to the Senate just timely, so that we can have hopefully a finished product by Tuesday. So have you been informed of that?
I have now.
Okay. All right. Any other business for the day?
What have we been doing 172? Or 142?
Well, let's talk, we'll go off the record and talk about it. Okay, we'll stand in adjourn.